Question you can ask now because now we have more time probably for that. As far as coordination of the activity of construction company is concerned, Norbert has already mentioned that it is really important because the construction company will perform only what is written and prescribed in the contract by you. If it is written in the contract that they need to take specific actions, they will take those actions. So let's talk for some time about the things which you need to take into account while developing the contract with the construction company. So first of all, here we need to talk about procurement of services and works, confirmation, warning, and consultation commitments of the contractor. The contractor needs to inform in writing to the customer about the circumstances which appear in the course of implementation of the project. And these could be either additional works we have already discussed with you together today. These could be some unexpected circumstances, some emergency situations, and therefore you need to talk about all the nuances of construction works which go beyond the scope of standard procedures, should be informed in writing by the contractor to the customer. The information about the site during the tender. The next point, right? So the constructor should be aware of all the circumstances, and of course, it cannot be binding, but it is desirable that the contractor visits the site before he submits or it submits his tender application, makes the examination, looks through the design documents, compares different constructive solutions, and passes a decision whether he should make an application or not. I don't know how it is in other countries, but in Ukraine it's considered to be okay if the contractor doesn't go to the sites, doesn't look at the design documents, but just takes the tender bid, makes an application without setting any price, and tries to win the tender. So the task is to win the tender, and then after that he will get clear as to what it has obtained and how it should be implemented. That is the usual practice, and on the legislative basis, it's impossible so far to make the contractor get acquainted with the site before the tender is won. But there is one rule of development of the design cost, if I'm not mistaken, and it's written in that rule, in that regulation, that the contractor is entitled, not should, but is entitled to get acquainted with the site to make some measurements. So this function is not prohibited by legislation, but it's also not binding. Therefore, in your work, you need to use this function, and Maxim has already told how you could do this. So there are some pre-tendering conferences during which the contractors get acquainted with the site, and our colleague from Moldova has mentioned the rule from the World Bank that when we have a complex situation, some project documents are just sold, design documents are sold for money. But what does the customer then get if he sells these documents? He records everybody who has bought them, and this is a small amount of money, but if these documents have been bought, it means that these people will come to a tender, will participate in it. But in this way, it makes prospective participants of the tender, prospective tenderers, get acquainted with the site with more details. But if you do it according to the legislation of Ukraine, this will definitely lead to the complaint submitted to the Anti-Monopoly Committee. Another factor is actual measurements. The contractor should make measurements on the site before he starts work implementation, and he should inform the site supervision and the customer's service about those measurements and their results. These could be measurements of let's say, the levelness of wall or some geometrical size of an object. Maybe the designer indicated wrong size, and then you will have the wrong volume in your project. So according to the Ukrainian legislation, by he I mean the contractor needs to do this before he starts work performance. It's not always easy and it's not always possible. For example, during one of the COMDAP projects in Slavutich, the school was had a facade plate, and Slavutich was built after the Chernobyl disaster. It was built quite quickly, and the surface was smooth, but when the tile was removed or the plate was removed, it was just there was the difference about 23 centimeters. It was impossible to level it. And if you do a stair, kind of a stair there, we wanted to arrange it, but it was impossible. So we applied a mineral wool layer of some 10 centimeters and then something else to ensure this leveling. This situation could not be seen until the very plaster was removed from the facade. So any insulation of the roof, any activity of the contractor should start with measurements. And for example, when you do insulation of the roof, and according to the design, you need to do it for 1,000 square meters, and then he does it, and it appears that there are 10 square meters more. It's impossible to have such a situation, and you need to tell the contractor that before their works, he needs to make the measurements and to make clear that he will have enough material to perform this work. The next point is the examination of the current situation of all the surfaces and so on. And I've already mentioned that, and this refers to external sizes, to some surfaces, because maybe there are some fractures on the walls. And where I participate in COMDAP projects as a consultant, I always ask for the recording of the facility before the work performance for us to have the exact data. And then I also suggest, I'm going to draw this because I don't have a slide. So what I suggest is the procedure which I was taught by Friedrich Hocherlein, a consultant. So let's have it as a kindergarten of this size, of this form. And you do thermal refurbishment. You have a lot of meetings and a lot of stakeholders involved. These are audit companies, technical consultants, your colleagues, support team, project team. What do I suggest is the following. You make a plan, a layout, this picture, even from Google, and you construct those arrays, like the outer appearance of the building, and you make pictures, you make photos with these numbers, and then during consultations, while communicating with consultants, it's very easy to get clear what you're talking about. This is facade number 3, conditional. Of course, there are some engineering designations according to some engineering access, but it's more difficult. And for example, in Sumy we have the numbered facades. In Mirhorod we have numbered facades. So I would recommend using this scheme. Also, please pay attention to the following issue: priority of technical documents. We will still discuss the details of this process, but what I'm going to tell is as follows. At the construction site, you will have a number of documents. These will be design and estimate documents. There will be bill of quantity. There will be technical drawings. There will be contract, and there will be tender documents. And all these documents together are legal. And on the first day, the contractor comes and has, what do I have to do? Because in my bills of quantity, mineral water is 70 centimeters, and in another document, I have, let's say, foam 100 centimeters thick. So what do I have to do? So you need to establish the priority, the degree of priority of your documents. Me and my colleagues think that the priority should be as follows. Number one is national construction norms, because you have state, national, DB and host SNP, no matter how what they are called, in different countries. These are national requirements, state requirements. And COMDAP actually disseminates this document. You do have this document where it's written that this is a priority document. Then the contract and tender bid. Pay attention to the fact that quite often, almost always, the contractor, if you don't make him do it in a different way, wins a tender, and it's beneficial to forget about it. And then every meeting will start with the following: and this design lacks this and that. But if you do what I have told you, that if you write to him that he should make the measurements before the performance, and if you make him do this work, this trouble will disappear, and you will understand that you need to get clear about the tender bid, because in the tender bid he provided her some suggestions, seeing that all. And quite often when the price is reduced, it's beneficial for them to start the meeting with such questions and such scandals. So this is document number one. Then the third document is technical drawings, and the fourth one is bills of quantity. And when at the meeting the contractor says that, okay, in bills of quantity lack this dismantling of some tap on of something, some material on the facade, you can tell him, okay, let's have a look at your tender bid. And our colleague has mentioned that it's a possibility, they have the possibility of putting a tick that they have seen this valve or this tap or whatever. So in this way you will try to avoid scandals and to efficiently resolve conflicts and solve problems. So if you have this priority of documents, of course you will still have questions. And for example, quite often I addressed Maxim because I didn't know what document we should be a priority for us. But now we have this list of priority documents. Here is another point. I have developed a form, and I can send it to the cities I'm going to work with. I have already coordinated it with Maxim. So here is a table. Here is a project, and to the right side is the tender. And you are implementing a project like construction. You have a contractor, and it's written mineral wool or rock wool, and here it's technically called in tender. With us, it's possible because not the grade, not the mark or the label, but the properties are included into the tender. It's okay with us. But at the beginning of the work, you give this table to the contractor, and you claim that here is the official project design, there is your tender bid, and please put it down at the very beginning what you have replaced with what. Because otherwise he will quickly forget about this replacement. The contractor anyway forgets about the tender bid, but he will not forget about this table because it's rather clear. So I think that this table should be used. We already use it in some European project, and in this way you will clearly see what is going on in on your facility. Our colleague knows that site supervision also exercises control over the input material quality, and when the wrong material is brought, he just forbids the contractor to use it. That is the role of site supervisor. But he can do it only on the basis of available information, so I suggest that you use this table to get all the information about the materials which are going to be used really on your site. So again, at the tender we have not rock wool or just a lamp with a blue strip, but for example it's written that procurement of mineral water with the density of 160 meters and lambda is like this, and for example there could be
several materials and corresponding to those properties, and the contractor will definitely be looking for the cheapest one, and therefore there will be a lot of problems connected with that. For example, I had a situation when mineral wool with the same density, one of them was solid, and one of them, when hung on the wall, would definitely not serve in the proper way. And that is the task of the site supervision, to make the control of the incoming materials. In Ukraine, we have the legislation describing the procedure, and you can also involve some examination offices or inspections when you have some suspicions, but it's difficult, and it causes delays in the construction process. So if you don't have the urgent pressing need for that, you'd better not involve it. But in this way, with help of this table, you can actually give the possibility for a site supervisor to perform this function. Also, the general terms of the contract should include the possibility of getting access to the facility during the implementation of the project and compensation of all the damages. The legislation says something about that, but in some projects of COMDEP 1, we had the situation when the contractor didn't allow the project team to the site. I was allowed, but the project team was not allowed access. So it's better to prescribe it, that the site is going to be attended by the representatives of the project team, by the customers' representatives, technical consultants of the support team. It's better to write in general words that some outsiders should have the opportunity to visit the site. Another important point is taking into account energy resources, electricity, water supply, lavatory, sewerage. According to Ukrainian legislation, the contractor should keep accounting of all the consumed energy resources, and in the design and estimate documents, he has the allocated budget for that. But now, this situation is already controlled by the regulatory authorities, and when your construction is over, is completed, in Zhmerenka, the contractor has not paid the money for electricity and water, and inspection will find it out and will impose a fine on you for your not making the contractor make this payment. So you, as the head of the project team, should include it into the contract, and then the performer contractor will do this. That will not be a problem if you prescribe it. Also, you should discuss the issues of accommodation of constructors. You should discuss the places for them to change their clothes, and these are minor things, but you need to prescribe this in the contract, as well as where the materials are kept and where the clothes, where their things and belongings of the constructors are stored. And if you don't discuss different things, they will just bring some materials and will store it in some places where it will be inconvenient for the people to even go along the corridors. Like we had a case in one of the towns when the contractor didn't want to lease some warehousing facilities, and he just left this equipment and left these materials on the facility, and there was no place for children to study and for people to walk along the corridors. But you should prescribe it in the contract, how the material should be stored, where, and all things like that. Also, there will be the problem of protection of mineral wool again in the open air against rain, because then it will be a poor quality material. It will never get dried, because you need a special method, a special technique in polyethylene for it to get dried. Also, you need to prescribe the need for the contractor to keep to health and safety rules. Seems to be clear, because this is controlled by some regulatory organizations, and they are clearly prescribed in the Ukrainian legislation, but nevertheless you need to draw attention to that. Also, the contract should say that the contractor should appoint the head
the masterman of the site. That must be one person, contact person, and that will be the person whom you will coordinate everything, and all the requests of the constructor will be voiced by him. You don't need to look who is responsible for wall insulation, who is responsible for window replacement, and tomorrow this person is changed and you have problems with finding who is responsible for what. So anyway, this must be a contact person, or maybe he could have a deputy, but it's much easier to work this way if in your communication you have just one person. Also, it's obligatory that you prescribe in the contract those meetings, working meetings, weekly, and later you will see how often you need those working meetings. At the beginning of your work, it should be every week, but while in the second period of your work, it's easier because, as somebody said, it's better to it's important to install the first window, and then all the other windows follow the first one and are installed either in the right way or in the wrong way. The day after tomorrow, we will have a look at the kindergarten in Zhokwa. And here the windows were installed in a very painful way, I would say so. The first window was installed, and the project team shot a movie about the installation of the first window, sent it to the support team, and there was a problem because the support team said it was done in the wrong way. Mainly that was related to the very technique of shooting because they were doing it from telephone or from camera, and then me and Dima went to get clear about the situation. So it appeared that just part of the installation process was shot in an inadequate way. And about as far as the second window is concerned, we were looking at the very procedure and writing a report, and then there was no problem about, and there were no remarks about the installation of the windows. So the task of the support team was to organize the procedure and to explain the builders how to do this. This was much easier and much cheaper than if they had installed all the windows and then we would have checked and then scolded them and made them do it in a different way. So we took the optimum way, the most efficient way, and got good quality of works. The changes in the services and works. The Norbert has already told you about the organizational procedure, and in Ukraine it fully corresponds to the one he has shared with you. According to the civil code, the contractor should, before he starts work performance, which are not in the design, inform the customer in writing and get a written confirmation, written permission to perform those works. And in Kyiv region and on some sites, I saw that there were additional works, and during commissioning, the inspection body just found out that there was no permission and then made the contractor pay the money back to the budget for those additional works. I mean that the customer was not allowed to make those payments because they had not been approved. And here the EU vision fully corresponds to the vision in Ukraine that no additional works could be performed if there is no written approval.
Who should take a decision whether it should be done or not should be done is the site supervisor. It is not the project designer, it is not your technical manager, it is the person who is responsible for the site supervision, who is competent enough to sign and to approve of this issue, because he's the first who will be considering that letter, stating what should be done, what would be the volumes. He will check at the site whether it should really be done, and later he will inform you that yes, it should be done, and then you provide administrative response. Also, according to your request, if you include it into the contract, the contractor may produce samples to be approved. What does it mean? You can ask the contractor to show you, to demonstrate to you, for example, street light lamp for street lighting. Or, for example, you can ask the contractor to show you the samples of mineral wool if you don't know how it looks like. So, certain things which technical characteristics description does not show their real properties. For example, what will be the light, whether the design of the lamp is nice or not. You can only see it with your own eyes. For example, I had a project Nevco in Kiev when there were 33 sites and the lamps were replaced with modern ones at 3 or 4 sites. And the headmaster of the school did not allow it to be installed because they were not satisfied with the appearance, with the external look of the lamps. It was not prescribed. The contractor has already bought the lamps, and really it was a painful issue because, well, it is understandable that the contractor has already bought 500 lamps and somehow it should be settled beforehand. Therefore, if you want to see something before the things are bought and look at them, this issue should be really included into the contract. Unfortunately, there is no mic. I think it should be just a separate point in the contract, or it should be appendix to the contract, or you may write it as one of the terms or conditions of the contract. It does not. It is not against Ukrainian legislation. You just ask for the control, just for you to be invited and for you to approve of the materials bought. Very often, when certain engineering equipment is bought, for example, the pumps or big boilers or big control panels, it is prescribed in the contract that the acceptance of these equipment is takes place at the factory, at the plant of the producer. So you go to the plant, the contractor is paying for the trip and accept these materials. In ComDAP projects it is not probably the case, but in big projects it is like that. So if, for example, a very big pump is produced in Sweden, you should go there and accept it there. Because if it comes here and it is 8 tons of metal engineering constructions, so you probably won't be able to see how it works. So there should be certain services that should be evaluated as the single unit. Again, you should include it into the contract. For example, approval of prices for all the works, I mean basic works and additional works. What is meant by a single price? For example, you have the contractor and there is an item in the contract, insulation of the wall, or facade wall, or some other walls. And there could be some additional works before the insulation, and then you use the same price, which was indicated as a result of the tender. So it means the contractor cannot use other prices or other materials, but you just declare that any additional works should be done according to the prices prescribed in the contract. Our general conditions of the contract, we have discussed it partially during our lunch break, and probably we should discuss this issue in more details. The question was whether we should give the advance payment to the contractor or not. This is one of the basic conditions of the contract sometimes, and in my opinion, I would say that there should not be advanced payments. The successful projects, for example, in Slavutic, did not pay this advanced payment. It means the contractor doesn't have any advance payment. The contractor buys the materials at his own expense, performs some part of the works, for example, insulates just one wall. For example, here we have 8 walls in this kindergarten, and for example, one wall will be performed, and then you accept it and pay for it. For the contractor, not to buy, for example, all the materials for kindergarten insulation. So these issues should also be included in the contract. Let's mention the drawbacks. For example, some of the projects will have, if you follow this way, you will have to produce 8 financial documents. But what is the plus? Is you come, you look at the wall, you discuss whether you like it or not, whether the site supervisor is satisfied, whether it is done according to all the procedures, everything is ideal. In this case, you just state, okay, we accept this wall and we pay for it. It means by following this procedure, you will have a chance to accept each particular type of work separately. But we have discussed it that it is not always possible. For example, for insulation works, it is possible. But for example, if we talk about boiler house repairs and boiler installation, and the cost of the boiler is 70% of the price, definitely the contractor should be given advance payment, because without it he won't be able to buy it. It means the contractor really needs this in advance payment. You again describe all the details in the project, how this advance payment will be used. You probably may give a call to the plant to make sure that really the boiler was ordered by the contractor, for you to understand that the advance payment was used for the targeted purpose. But mind that accepting some works by parts probably will give you some disadvantages, but at the same time, you will have more chances to manage the construction works. And also, for example, if the construction manager knows how to do one wall, and if that wall was performed in a proper way, he understands how to do it more times, he does it quicker, he does it in a proper way, and really everything goes smoothly. So mind, this is a very useful function that probably should be used in your contracts. So, for example, in your tender documents, when you have your requirements to the construction company, you do not state what kind of sum should be available, should be at the disposal of the construction company in order to produce, to do construction works. Probably in our legislation it is not mentioned at all. I know our legislation regarding public procurements. I also know some issues of Romanian legislation. It seems to me our legislation allows us to include into tender documents those requirements which are voiced by the client. Believe us, certain things which you mentioned for me seem to be a bit strange. For example, there are certain requirements. Any law as well as construction norms describes minimum requirements, and the client has the right to establish his or her own requirement. And if you specify your requirements to specific organizations, it can be investigated only in a special way when you have some evidence. Well, we have so what I probably offer is to do a special workshop on procurement, because all our countries are united by one thing. We have differences regarding procurements in terms of national character, but we still all can use Prague requirements. It is the only way out of the situation. We in Moldova, at least me, we use World Bank requirements for some procurements For example, if we have UNDP as a donor or World Bank as a donor. For the European delegation, or if something is funded by the European Union, it's much easier to use Prague in all respects, because really a number of problems, potential problems, are is just removed, because when we follow Prague requirements, the problems do not appear. I set minimum criteria to the company. I state, if you do not have available funds to perform these works, you are not suitable for my order. If I have €1 million contract, I would never allow the company to perform the works if it has only 500 million rubles, let's say. Probably the company should be able to open at least a credit line or something like that. For us, this is like that. Well, if we started discussing procurement, definitely there are certain advantages of Prague, but it also has some disadvantages. Definitely Prague is not a panacea, and in those projects where the applicants are local self-government bodies, for them national public procurement regulations are more understandable and are much easier. The project will be over tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow there will be some financial inspections and checks, and for them it will be quite difficult to explain why they have not used the national rules of procurement. I think we'll come back to the procurement regulations a bit later, but you cannot state that Prague is just a solution to all the problems. When we talk about tender procedures, there are a couple of mechanisms how you can get rid of the so-called weak companies. First of all, bank guarantee mechanism or tool. You, as project team, are authorized at the stage of tender to ask the contractor to show bank guarantee which is compatible to the cost of your project. For example, 20% guarantee from the bank that the company has these funds, or the bank is ready to provide the loan to the company for a certain amount of money. So it means the company has access to financial resources. The second mechanism is bank guarantee of the contract, of the agreement. This is a sort of insurance, and this is the guarantee that the company will be able to implement that project. Another variant is financial turnover or annual financial turnover of the company. For you to make sure that this is a serious company and not just the company which exists on the market for a couple of months. But again, it does not guarantee the point that financial condition of that company is really some dubious. Therefore, if you do not make advance payments, it's probably one more guarantee that the company will not take away your money or will take this advance payment and doesn't do anything. Post-works payment is a sort of insurance for you. It is your insurance, and for you as a team, as a client, it is much more beneficial. There is another side of the coin. We all the time talk about regulations and rules, and definitely there should be tender documents prepared in English. Unfortunately, practice in many countries shows that it's very difficult to find a good contractor. And lots of projects, our projects, are based in small towns. And actually, it means that the projects bear the risk that it will be difficult to find a contractor as such. We had cases when the projects announced tender twice or even 3 times, and not because of some problems, but because of the fact that there were no contractors who were capable of performing their works. So we also have to take into account this factor. Responding to the last phrase you have mentioned, for example, in our region, we faced quite a different situation. We have lots of small companies, but at the same time, when we talk about projects funded from the Energy Efficiency Fund, uh, the big companies did not apply. After this, there were lots of investigations by the Anti-Corruption Center, and it was explained by that fact. So the small companies were not competent enough. Those who were ready to do the works in a proper way automatically are lost because cost reduction schemes were applied, because the prices at the initial stages were low and later the prices were increased several times. Therefore, probably I do not have enough competences to think about it. But when you were talking about procurements and the point that you have stated, the idea about procurement workshop was really very good. How we should organize the procurement, what kind of work should be procured. Lots of people are afraid of doing it, but it is mm, really not difficult. For example, we organized a tender for a small kindergarten installation according to the Prague procedure, and immediately we are going to have only those companies that will be able to read the documents in English. Or even if they don't want, they are not capable of doing it themselves, they will find somebody who will explain it to them. And they will be ready to provide their offers in English. But the document is really very convenient. It is well processed. Yes, it is different from the template of the World Bank, but it's really good. And by the way, Romania has taken Prague as the basis for their national procurement templates. Romania is already part of the European Union and they have accepted Prague as the basis. We have also approximated our internal procurements to Prague regulations, but there are still lots of hidden mechanisms which allow the companies to actually break the tender procedure. Regarding procurement, there is one more aspect. This is complaint to Anti-Monopoly Committee. So any unclear formulation may result in the complaint to Anti-Monopoly Committee and your tender is blocked. And lots of complaints are submitted. There are even special companies that specialize in preparing such complaints. So really with us it's like that. If you use Prague, you will not have the complaints. The next point, final acceptance of works. Final acceptance of works should be described in details in your requirements to design documents, because every contractor has its own interpretation of it. For example, the works are completed, you give acceptance documents, and that's it. But you should have key stages. For example, the contractor informs the client in written form about the completion of works. Then the client organizes a meeting at the site with all the stakeholders. There is examination of the site. In case certain defects are detected, the list of the defects is made. So the whole situation is fixed. The defects removal period is established, and after the defects were removed or were corrected, the contractor informs the client that everything has been done and the site is ready to be accepted. After this, the client again organizes a meeting at the site, checks once again that all the defects were corrected and removed, and the final acceptance of works takes place. This procedure should be described in your contract, because after completion of works, the contractor is not going to participate in any of your meetings and do anything else if you do not prescribe it. Executive documentation. This is an obligatory element according to the requirements of the current legislation. For example, in Slavodich, for kindergarten insulation, the executive documentation was like that, and for school it was like that. I was also signing it, and I remember how thick the pack was. What is included into executive documentation? First of all, equipment passports, equipment certificates for everything. All those documents that enable you to understand what materials were used at your site. And the third part is the acts for hidden works, for inside internal works. And these documents are signed by the contractor, site supervisor, and construction design supervisor. And what are latent works? These are works which are not visible. For example, plastering of the wall. It is not understandable whether it was done or not, but it actually influences the insulation stage. And if you have the document with 3 signatures, that, for example, this work has been performed, it is understandable that it has been performed. Availability of executive documentation is regulated by Ukrainian legislation, is described in all the details. You have just to include this requirement into your contract and to require it from the contractor. Also, the contract should include the item on weekly reports on construction works. The template of the report is submitted by the project team. It is not difficult to complete. The key information that is included there: what works have been performed for the week and what works are planned for the next week. The document allows you to trace the dynamics of the construction works and to approximately plan the completion of construction works. Also, you should include the point regarding the visit of the support team to control the quality of construction works. Construction works quality control will be discussed by one of my colleagues, but when we do this visit to the site, we probably have a meeting, we examine the site, and we also produce the photos of the site, in particular the photos of the defects detected. The report is given to you as the project team manager, and what you are going to do with it is just your own business. Talking about executive documents, here you see the list with references to Ukrainian legislation regulating the presence, availability of such documents. And I also would like to add that while performing the works, the contractor is supposed to have the works log, which is filled in every day. And if we have, for example, a visit from the inspection of state architectural control, and on that day the welding works are performed and the log does not mention it, there is a fine of up to 20,000 euros. So really the fines are huge. The procedure is understandable and transparent. Who is in control of this log? Site supervisor. The project for construction works, the design of construction works. Lots of people do not do it, but the document is included into current legislation. There are special construction norms that explain how the design of construction works should be performed. It is not done by the design company, but it is performed by the services of the design. I'm talking about work execution design. For example, only the contractor knows how many working teams will be used for this particular site. So, for example, 4 teams will do this work for 1 week, while 1 team will be doing the same amount of works for 4 weeks. So you see what kind of materials will be used, where the workers will live, what will be the amount of materials, etc. If the document is produced in the proper way, you'll get lots of useful information from it. Also, in work execution design, you see the detailed schedule. Do not accept the schedule which states Windows installation 7 months, walls insulation 3 months. Just have all types of works for one facade. For example, week 1, day installation, week 2, installation, week 3, something else, for you to be able to trace the dynamics. For example, in Slavutich, we um, were trying to insulate the reveals, internal reveals, and it was done by 2 workers for 7 months. And then I asked how many windows you have, 500, how many reveals you have, or how many installations you have made, 25. And when you are going to finish all the rest? Next month. Well, if you have 25 reveals that have been done for 2 months by 2 people, it means if you want to complete it this month, you need 50 people more. So, by just understanding such simple calculations, by spending 5 minutes for this calculation, you will be able to understand where the contractor is just telling the truth and where the contractor is lying. Really, it is not difficult. The document is very informative. I really encourage you to use the document and to ask work execution design from the contractor. Acceptance of the site of the object into use or introduction into exploitation. There is a special application which is prepared, a special commission is established. There are experts from the state inspection, architectural inspection. They examine the site, compare everything with the project documents, and then give you the confirmation document. The procedure is fully transparent. The schedules are established. All applications are submitted through electronic resource. So if you submitted all the documents, in 5 days you might expect the commission. So really it is a nice procedure, no corruption element. It is an obligatory procedure, but please write in your contract that the contractor is supposed to help you to prepare the acceptance documents. So in case you will not have all the documents, you won't be able to go through this procedure in a proper way. Thank you. That's everything from me. In case you have any questions, I'll be able to answer the questions. And I would like to sum up. The things I have mentioned are mentioned in the document of ComDep. It is available in Ukrainian, Russian, or English. Take it as the basic document. Include all the requirements I have mentioned. You may include some comments to the contract with your contractor, and believe me, it will be much easier for you to go through construction stage. Try to get acquainted right now. Probably some team will be the first team. You will prepare your contract. Let's say Dubno will be the first one, Sumy will be the next one, or probably Sumy won't do it. But in case Dubna prepares the document, you will hear their comments, you will add your own things, you won't make their mistakes, and definitely you will spend less efforts for the preparation of the document, but you really will have good experience. You do not compete, you are all united by one goal. The goal is to implement the project in your city, and therefore there should not be any competition between you.
So I'm from Sumy, with a lot of problems, and maybe my question is a little bit silly, but I'm trying to get as much experience as possible. If you could get back to the slide dedicated to advanced payments, so there was a phrase about additional works which appear all of a sudden, but it was written in brackets that you do it without any additional payments. So if I've got it right, if there arise any unforeseen costs works, so the sum of the contract with the contractor does not change. No, what is meant is not additional works, but your estimate includes a certain list of works. For example, for you to insulate a wall, you need to bring mineral wool to unload it, to glue it, to remove the defects on the flower bed, on the lawn, and to do a whole set of works. Uh, and you need just to include that the contractor should not require additional payment for additional works like disposal of waste or something like that. And the recommendations of the CONDAP program, there is a list of uh, basic works and that everything corresponds to the Ukrainian legislation. So that is what I meant in brackets, that you don't have to pay additionally for the works which are included into that comprehensive set of works. And if we take the estimates of documents, the design and estimate documents, you will see that insulation of walls includes a certain number of works. And some contractors are just not willing to look at this list. They're trying to declare that waste disposal or some other things are additional works, but they are not additional, they are included into this list. Also, additionally, you don't have to pay for the requirements for summer works. Like you have to close their facade because you know that you cannot glue mineral wool in the sunlight. So technologically, they are not to be additionally paid for, while winter works are not considered to be support works. But you know this could be included into the general production costs. Well, it is of multi-use, and they cannot. They have just bought it and they are using it. They have not bought it just for your specific facility. There is also the notion of the so-called temporary roof or temporary cover. In COMDAP, they don't exactly use this notion, but in the Ukrainian legislation, we already have this notion. And to repair the roof or to insulate the roof, quite often in COMDAP, you have to bear the facility. And we have had cases in Ukraine. Well, during that period, there was heavy rain, and the facility was flooded. So there is a possibility for temporary roof for cover, where you do the dismantling works and then you remove it all. But it's written in the legislation that this film used as a cover is paid by 30% for the contractor, and as far as scaffolding is concerned, he only gets 20%. I mean that he can use it 5 more times, but that's all prescribed in the legislation. And when you come to a specific facility, you need to correctly plan those works and to get clear about that with the expert. You don't have to pay for it in case it has not been approved within your design. I just wanted to suggest we have considered the example of Ukraine, but maybe colleagues from other countries could comment upon that, how these issues are settled in your countries. It would be of interest to listen to the representatives of Armenia, Georgia, because we don't have that many projects dealing with facilities, with buildings there. I have a small addition. In the contract, we also prescribe the services and maintenance. And with us, we do it all the year round, almost. And these works are also done by the contractor. And after the end of the year, we sign the final handover certificate or acceptance certificate. And another small point. In the project, you also need to prescribe training of staff. which will work with this technology, which will operate this technology, because it's a new installations in the new system, heating system or whatever system. Right. The issue of training, it's the issue I really agree with you. In particular, the training on ventilation systems and individual heating units. But Ukrainian legislation prohibits the contractor to operate and maintain the facility after completion of the project. Only the staff of the servicing maintenance organization have to do this. And it's clearly written that when a boiler house or IHU is put into operation, everything else should be performed by the maintenance operation or operation company. It's prescribed in the legislation, and we have a clear distinction in this issue. The same is with us as in Armenia. In the contract, we could also prescribe the issue about maintenance being for 2 years. It's kind of a warranty. Well, guarantee is possible, but maintenance is another thing. According to our legislation, we have the warranty for 10 years if it comes to facade insulation, but not maintenance, because maintenance cannot be done by the contractor. It's prohibited. And if you could tell, what is the practice if there is no advance payment? So are there any delays in terms of work performance, or is it the same? Is the situation the same in both cases? Well, my practice shows that if you don't no advance payment is made, everything is made 3 times quicker. Because if there is no money, creditors are trying to pressurize you, the staff is asking for salary, and everything becomes more dynamic. But of course, you have to pass decisions on an individual basis in every specific case. I would recommend you, since I'm not the project manager, I'm just an engineer participating in groups of project management, and I perform my engineering function. And here are your colleagues from whom I've heard a lot, and I think that the situation without advance payment is much better. And if we take into account that the fact that there is a great chance that the contractor could come who is not even intending to perform the works on a timely basis. I will not mention any towns and cities, but I will show you later the pictures where the quality of works was awful. You cannot even imagine how awful it was. For example, we come together with Maxim to one town and we make the examination of the facility. According to the design, the EU recommendations claim that when windows are installed, you need to use the vapor non-permeating film. But we see some scotch there and some adhesive tape. But it's written in the design that this is adhesive tape, and he says that okay, it's a tape, and he brings the sticky tape here. He says that this is a tape, so what is the problem with this? So even such funny situations occur, and therefore I would ask you to indicate the material. According to the Ukrainian legislation, it should clearly be indicated. There are examples of its producers for us to understand that this is, for example, vapor-resistant film, but sometimes they even tried to make a longitudinal section of this film, of this tape, to save some money for themselves. So quite a funny situation. Just one comment concerning advance payment and absence of advance payment. You need to pass this decision before you start tendering a process, because if in the tender documents there was no advance payment, it cannot appear from anywhere.
Some question. Thank you. It's not a question, but regarding 1 or 2 years of operation and maintenance by the contractor, I would like to add that it's only for awareness purposes and training purposes. So the contractor will also train the personnel from, let's say, condominiums or municipality, so that after 1 or 2 years they will be doing the operation and maintenance of the solar PV plants. On the other hand, we also are trying to add a control point, like a performance guarantee, according to which the contractor will pay off for the deviation of production of the plant by the end of each quarter. For example, if they are guaranteeing that the plant is going to produce, for example, 10 kilowatt hours during that quarter, and they produce only 8, they are going to pay up for the other 2 kilowatt hours or 20 kilowatt hours that they haven't produced. So we are trying to implement this in our pilot projects, both in Aparan and Arctic, and also in Yerevan. So we will be sharing some experience later on how it's going to work, both technically, financially, and also from legal aspects. Merci.
Thanks. So I pass the floor to another technical expert.